This incident was tragic on so many levels. We have an individual who chose, for reasons that are not fully understood by us at this time, to put himself in a position where officers had to use deadly force in order to protect themselves, resulting in the loss of life. We have officers who have to manage their emotions with this incident, because no officer wants to become involved in a deadly force situation, particularly one in which a life is lost. And then you have families and friends of both the suspect and the officers who are involved in this, who are impacted. And then you have, of course, members of the community who may be unsettled by this incident. So we don't take this lightly. We understand the magnitude of what happened, and that is why we are very methodical and very diligent in how we are approaching this to make sure that it's handled appropriately. And as Lieutenant Gajewski said, we thank our fire department for being on scene timely and rendering aid. A testament to the partnership that we have with the fire department here in this city. And so when we examine this incident as a whole, what we really have are two overarching elements. We have what happened, or the facts, and then we have what are the underlying causes that contributed to this incident. And so the facts are fairly straightforward. We had an individual who was involved in a domestic violence incident, armed with a knife. The domestic violence victim told our dispatchers that this individual was armed. This individual may harm our officers. Gave a location where this suspect was last seen, and our officers saw this suspect shortly thereafter. Officers first saw this person when he was approximately 100 feet away from the officers, and immediately started giving verbal commands, giving this person an opportunity to stop, to give up, to abandon whatever intentions he had at that point. And this person continued advancing despite these very clear and concise commands from our officers to stop. We attempted to use less lethal force in order to stop the person. The officer saw the knife. Officers continued giving these commands. The person got within what we estimate to be around 12 feet away from our officers, continued advancing after the failed taser deployment, and there was a discharge of firearms from our officers. So the facts are fairly straightforward, and we stand by our officers in this case. This is an unfortunate use of force. Again, we try to resolve all of our incidents that we have in a peaceful manner, but this was one of those cases where our officers had no choice but to protect themselves from harm from this person. So the facts are fairly straightforward. But then we look at the underlying causes. And that's a little bit more complex, because we're looking at this crossroads between mental health and domestic violence. These are two issues that communities across this country are struggling to deal with. Police departments across this country are having troubles and challenges in dealing with these issues of mental health and domestic violence. And for example, weeks before this incident ever happened, we did a deep dive into our data related to violent crime in the city. And what we found is that over half of the aggravated assaults or felony assaults that occurred in this city over the last 2 years had a domestic violence nexus. And what really startled us is when we found that almost 70% of our homicides had a domestic violence nexus during this same period of time. And then we look at our mental health. Over the last year alone, we responded to over 1,500 calls for service involving individuals who have some sort of mental illness. This year alone, we have responded to over 270 calls for service for individuals who have some sort of mental health challenge. Approximately 4 calls per day so far this year. This is a this is an issue that communities across the country, that society has to deal with, and we're going to have to make sure that we're collaborating and partnering with a lot of our social service agencies and other entities who specialize in dealing with mental health and domestic violence. But we were proactive because well before this incident happened, we recognized that as a police department, we had to do something to help our community deal with domestic violence and mental health. And so we were already in the infancy stages of creating a program that would help members of this community, and as well as the police department, deal with domestic violence. A partnership with our courts, partnership with our community, partnership with other social service agencies. We'd already begun the process of developing a crisis intervention team program that would eventually train all of our officers in dealing with individuals who have mental health challenges while they're in the line of duty. So this is something that we've recognized. We've been very proactive with this, but nonetheless, it's something that we still have some work to do as a community, as a society. And so I can't overstate how serious this is emotionally, mentally, for everybody involved. Our condolences, as I said before, go out to the family of the deceased. We're doing everything we can to ensure that our officers, as well as their families, have all the support that they need, the appropriate treatment to recover from this and get back to work. And we want the public to know that there are resources available for domestic violence and mental health. And if you are involved or know that someone else who's involved in a domestic violence situation or someone who is suffering from severe mental illness, then we strongly encourage folks in the community to reach out to some of these social service agencies and some of these other organizations that have ample resources to help people to navigate these very complex issues associated with that.